Yeah, you've never done a sub two?
So I did one like 3 years ago, but it was like a subtail type thing, right? So we only had it for
Okay,
like 3 months. Like it,
got
it
it,
was a short term thing.
got it.
Um, but I've never done a long term one, and I know I've come across opportunities where I'm like, man, like if I felt really comfortable with this, it'd make sense for a subject too, but like I just didn't feel comfortable enough for it. So like I just like either send it to somebody else who does or push it away or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So
Okay, okay. So so your fear is more so um not only the mechanics in the back end, but like the do on sale also, I'm assuming.
yeah, so due on sale clause is obviously a concern. Like you said, the mechanics on the back end of like, making sure that you don't do anything to trigger that due on sale clause along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the benefit side to the seller? Obviously, like sometimes a subject to is the only way they can sell their
Right,
property for
right,
the amount they need to pay
right,
the mortgage off.
right.
But I know there's other benefits that are there.
Uh-huh.
On top of that as well. So just being able to kind of explain somebody why they should do it, like why should they leave the debt in their name
Mm.
versus like just holding on, like basically why should they give me
Yeah.
the deed to the property and keep the debt in their name? What's the benefit for them? You know?
Absolutely. So it's crazy because that's the question you also get a lot from sellers itself. But
Right.
but the reality is, bro, like the number one source of sub two deals for us is pre-foreclosures.
Okay.
It's sellers that are already in huge pain that they want you to take it, like they're begging you to take over the mortgage, right?
Right.
So it's not like they're super reluctant. Yes, they do have questions of, hey, what happens if you default? How does, because you have to, like, when you're doing subject to transactions, you have to educate the seller to avoid the due on sale being triggered in the back end because they need to know, hey, once we close on this, you cannot cancel the insurance and all, which are, I'm going to go through those details, but those are
Yeah.
the things that trigger the due on sale because some people they do the acquisition and then they don't educate their seller as far as how the mechanics work so the seller is on the same page and understand,
Yep.
hey, we have to be on the same team here. Don't do nothing, let me do everything, right? But
Right.
um the reality is 99.9% of your subject to deals will come from like high pain point sellers, which is the number
Okay.
one source for us is pre-foreclosures, a lot of divorce, tax liens, HOA liens, those type of like sellers, right? So
Right.
for those is the matter of explaining, hey, this is how I can, number one, I can get caught up on your arrears, you're underwater. Oftentimes they don't have equity, or if they have equity, is not a lot of it. But because they cannot afford to pay off whatever they owe and somebody's trying to foreclose on them, they're okay. You just getting caught up on that if you can, or sometimes doing loan modifications, giving them a little bit cash and literally holding on to the remaining equity in the back end too. So you do
Yep.
subject to plus seller finance, which is a hybrid deal, right?
Yep.
So that's the number one source. So with those people, it's just the mechanics. It's like just explaining, hey, in the back end, once we close the transaction, 30 days later, that's when we deal with the insurance. You don't do nothing, the seller don't do nothing. At close of escrow, there's two documents you need to have your seller sign. And that's why most people they use also a transaction coordinator that understands creative finance, right? Because you and I both know, like I'm too busy being an acquisition and a visionary. I don't have time for paperwork. But like paperwork is everything on a subject to deal.
Right.
So at close of escrow, not only they need to sign a limited power of attorney for you for the mortgage, but they need to sign also a limited power of attorney and disclosures for the insurance as
Okay.
well. So that allow you to go in, talk to the bank, and do whatever you want, right? They have to
Yep.
give you their login. Most people have online logins for their mortgage. Soon as you close, you log in and you change all the information, the mailing address, contact information, all of that. So if the bank need to call somebody, they call you. And you never touch the insurance before at least 30 days went by after close.
Okay.
And what people do wrong, and then they have the do on sale call on them, there's only two ways that the due on seller will be called on you. Is either one, you're not paying the mortgage on time. When I say on time, when subject to transaction, your monthly payment should be on the first, should be already with the lender
Right.
because they're subject to, right? So you don't want them to look into anything, right? Even though like most of them, by the way, that happened to me, the due on sale, it was to handle it was that quick. Wells Fargo. I bought a property subject to after close of escrow, the seller passed away. Then I learned that when the seller, when we closed escrow, he wasn't married. He got
Mm.
married right after we closed escrow. So his new wife was his girlfriend at the time I bought the property, and she's not on deed, she's not on title, she's not on the mortgage. Okay.
Right.
But because she knew he sold me the property subject to, she tried to blackmail me and ask me for money. So
Mm.
she's like, hey, I'm gonna call the bank unless you give me money, right? Which she
Yeah.
did, by the way. She did. She called the bank. She triggered East Wells Fargo. She triggered something where they started looking into it. So they contacted me. I said, yeah, we bought the property subject to. We got caught up. The guy was behind on his payments. He was behind 3 months on his mortgage. Gave him, I remember, I think $5,000 at close of escrow. Then we took over the mortgage. Okay, and I wrapped that property. I financed it to homestead buyer. I told Wells Fargo, yeah, we bought it subject to, and we've been making the payments on time, which you guys know because you receive the check every single month. And we went through a title company, and yes, we do own the property. Uh, like, how do you want us to handle this? Because I'm not giving her a penny
Right.
because she wasn't on deed and title, and she cannot include this property on the probate process because we already bought it, we own it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, just send us the documents, the closing documents, and then the basically the what proves that I'm on deed and title. I sent them the hard dude because at the time it was what I think, like it wasn't reflecting yet on because title companies takes a little bit while to
Yeah. It,
record.
it takes a while. Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't reflecting yet, right? So I said no problem. I sent them everything, bro. Like, okay, good. Just keep making the payments on time,
Hmm.
and that was it, right? Now,
Nice.
could they have pushed for the due on sale? They could have, but remember, the banks, what business are they?
Right.
Lending business. They don't care
Yeah.
about, all right? So for them, but let's say hypothetically, even if they had decided, to be honest, like to push for the due on sale. So if the seller is alive, I can just deed the property back to the seller, and the next minute I'll buy it on an agreement for sale. So I leave the deed and title, I buy it sub two, but I don't transfer it. And that's
Yeah.
it. The due on sale is gone. But the reality is you can buy a property and then the seller can get abducted by aliens. So that strategy doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So the only other way there is companies out here, bro, that actually at close of escrow you can pay is insurance companies. You can
An
pay them. I've
insurance for
used
the
them.
due on sale clause.
Yeah, I've used them only once
Okay.
because it's like, to me it's so easy to handle it. Number one, number two, unless you mess up the insurance and the you pay the mortgage late, it's not gonna happen. So they charge such a big fee that is not worth, because some of them charge like I think 10% of the sales price.
Oh wow.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, bro, I'm not willing to do that just because. So is the paperwork and then also the way you close. Like for example, right now, you and I know that right now interest rates is so high that properties are not selling, right?
Right.
So right now it is risky to close on a subject to deal the way I would do it in a good market. Meaning, if you're closing on a subject to deal right now, it's better to close on a trust. Okay, you close on a trust, so you make it seem like the seller just took the property and transfer it into a trust.
So you create a trust, and the trust is taking the deed over to the property.
Exactly. Yeah. The,
Okay.
the closing attorney do it. You don't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But because what happens is because the interest rate keeps hiking, some banks is gonna start looking into which loans have been transferred that now they're losing money because the existing loan is at 3.5%, but
Yeah.
now
And
they
then go
could
get
get 9,
six.
10%. So they would start maybe screening and looking. But if even then, like it's not something we panic about. Number two, even if somebody wanted to call do on sell on you, people think it takes 2 days. It takes them a long time to foreclose. So you have the time to refinance, sell it, wrap it, do whatever like you have the time to find a solution.
Now, real quick, when you say wrap it, what do you mean by that?
So wrapping is I take over the property, I take it over subject to, right? And then I create new terms. So let's say hypothetically, like the property I was telling you, Wells Fargo called me. When I bought it, the seller still owed 268,000 on it.
Okay.
And the property is worth 350 ARV, I'm talking.
Yep.
But I bought it, I didn't fix it, I wrapped it as is, okay? So I bought it at 268. His underlying debt was 3 point some change. It was a VA loan.
Okay.
So what I did is I found a homestead buyer, a guy that owned a dealership, like he flipped cars.
Okay.
looking to get into home ownership. He has the money, he just don't have credit. He don't have good credit.
So you're
So
doing like almost like a lease to own type option, basically.
yeah, but wrap is very different from lease to own because
Okay.
lease to own is the person have a lease and an option to buy, right? But
Yep.
number one, you don't transfer deed and title on their name. Number two, you still a landlord,
Okay.
right? If there is anything that need to be fixed, you have to fix it as a landlord. In most states, certain
Yeah.
states you don't have to on a lease option, but still. And then on top of that, your monthly payment on a lease option doesn't go towards the purchase unless you set it up that way. But oftentimes they just have an option price that is locked in for 5 years, and they buy it at that price in 5 years, but their monthly payment is still just rent.
Right.
On a wrap though is different. So I have my terms 268 on the underlying debt with Wells
Yeah.
Fargo, 3.5%. And then I market it at, I sold it for 299.99. Okay.
Okay.
And the guy gave me 30,000 down payment. That was, I think, roughly 10% or so. He gave me a $30,000 down payment. So he covered all my costs as far as like closing costs and all of that. I came out of
Yeah.
my own money. And then I financed it to him at 9% for 5 years.
Just financing that $30,000 gap, basically.
Exactly. So I created my own
Okay.
terms, and it's very literal. I created my own terms and I wrapped it on top of Wells Fargo terms.
Yep. Okay.
And
I
then I'm
see.
making
So
the
you're
difference.
you're essentially doing it's like a subject to
Yeah,
wrapped
you're
around with an
creating,
owner
yeah,
financing deal for
that you
the
created.
amount. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All
So
right,
you're
dude, that's
basically
sick.
creating a mortgage yourself
Wow.
and you
Yeah.
become the bank on that. The good thing about that one though, Brandon, is you have zero landlord liability. Is their property. If the
Right.
toilet leaks, if anything happens, they deal with it.
So
Secondly,
does the deed get transferred to them also?
you can decide to transfer it or you don't. Now,
Okay.
here's two scenarios. If you transfer it, you can ask them a higher down payment. Most people won't give you 30, 40, 50,000 down and then have you keep the title and deed.
Okay.
They would want the deed and title so they feel like the house is theirs, right?
Right.
But if you ask a little bit less, then you can decide, hey, I'm gonna do it an agreement for sale. So I'm gonna finance it to you an agreement for sale. Why? Because maybe you need the tax benefits. Because when you transfer deed and title, you lose the tax benefits.
Yep.
That's the only difference, right? But you can do it both ways. We've done it both ways. Oftentimes, personally, because it's not like I'm making billions a month, dude, I just here, just have the deed and title. They're a little bit more motivated to pay me out sooner, and I can charge them more on the monthly basis. And the thing is, my cash flow is also net because I have zero expense on it.
Right. Yeah. It's pure
Right.
pure
And then I
net
pay
income. Yeah.
myself also a wholesale assignment up front with the down payment.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So if their down payment's like 10 grand, that's your assignment fee basically, and then you start getting interest on that remaining balance that's there with
Right.
your
So
terms that you have
so
set
for
up.
example, this one he gave me 30, it was $35,000. Closing costs costed me $10,000. I paid the 10 and I was left with 25,000 to my pockets.
Nice.
And then I financed the rest. So that's what a wrap is.
Okay, so let me
Okay.
ask you this real quick because I always like in my head I'm asking myself like what are the sellers going to ask me as far as like
Yeah, yeah,
questions
go
go
ahead.
or like what are the dangers of this? So let's say that you do the wrap and you decide to go the transfer the deed route, okay?
Right, right.
What happens if they stop paying you or they stop paying that
The wrap
mortgage?
buyer?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so that's a fantastic question, by the way. So here's what happens. Again, we go back to sub two is all about the paperwork. The way I set up my paperwork with the guy, because remember, most sellers, like even though they don't mind selling your subject to, but their biggest fear is that property coming back to them. You stop
Right.
paying, now they have to get back a property, they have to foreclose on you. So one, we give them the peace of mind the way we set up our paperwork, they don't have to foreclose. If we miss 31 days of payments, depending on the state, we put a deed in lieu in place.
Deed in lieu of
Yeah,
foreclosure.
here
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Maryland, they don't like the deed in lieu.